We're going to make one more common component in this project. You can make plenty of others, but we'll stick with one more. This will be a text component. So this will help us to apply consistent text styles so that all of our, paragraph tags are consistent, all of our H1s, H2s, and you don't have to guess at what the styles are or search around or anything. We'll just have it kind of nice and neat. I'll also show you how to dynamically render a React a prop, which will turn into a component, which will subsequently turn into an HTML element. So we'll learn some new React type stuff here as well. So in our components directory, let's go ahead and create a new file. We can call it text.js. I'm going to use my shortcut to create a new set of boilerplate. We're going to have a couple of props. So first, it's going to accept children, which is going to be the string that we pass in. It's going to accept an element prop, which is going to be lowercase when we pass it in. But in this component, this text component, we want to let the React component know that we're rendering a component rather than an element called element. So let me type this out and then I'll explain. So by putting this colon and then the capital E element, and you can call this whatever you want, but I'm going to call it element. What we're doing here is if we passed in element like this with lowercase, then React would think that this is an HTML, like a DOM element that we're trying to pass in, like called element. So like in the same way that you would see like a P tag rendered in the DOM, it would literally say element, which is not a valid HTML element. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, actually, this is a dynamic element that we're going to pass in. And whatever we pass into element, if it's a P tag or an H1 or whatever, by having this capital E element and accepting a prop for it and then renaming it, then React knows, okay, I need to render something custom here and not just like an HTML DOM node called element. We can also accept a class name, which will apply any styles. And this should be good for now. So on our element, we can say class name equals class name. We have our element here, which is, again, and I'll show you in the DOM what this is going to end up looking like. And then we'll have our children. We can have props. So children, we're going to want a string to be passed in here. Since we're rendering the HTML element and we just wanted to have a string inside. Class name will also be a string. And element will also be a string. And let's double check. So in link, we have our prop types. Okay, so we're having our default props defined. So let's keep that consistent. Our default props defined up here. So our default element is going to be a paragraph tag. So we can save this and let's go over to our index.js file. So pages/index. And let's import this new component. So we'll say import text from components/text. And then we can use it. So here's an H1, and you can see, margin, this might be consistent, or this might be a one-off style, and same with aligning it to the center. However, we want to make sure that if we're using an H1 that it looks consistent across the application. And so we're setting this text 3XL, and then at a medium breakpoint, we're getting bigger, so 5XL. So we would have a couple of ways of doing this. If I have another file, another page that uses an H1, each page should have an H1. I would have to dig around and find the styles and apply it, copy, paste, whatever. But by doing this, we can kind of map out some styles so that it's consistent. So let's take a look at what that would look like. I'm going to go ahead and just cut these H1 specific styles. I'm going to leave the margin bottom 12 and the text center alone. Instead of an H1, I'm going to say text. So we're going to use our text component. And then we'll say element is H1. So if I save it, we're going to see something that we need to fix, but let's just take a look at what the DOM looks like now. So if we switch over, so we can see that we have this H1. So even though we have text here, because we pass in this element of H1, React is smart enough to say, hey, we're supposed to render an H1 here, and it'll dynamically generate it. So we can even switch this to prove the point. Let's do H2 and save. And now you can see it switched to an H2. So you can also, you may have also noticed, Find Your Next Adventure got a little bit smaller. So if we flip back to an H1, so there are some default styles, and we could certainly fall back on that. Let's take a look at what this looks like on mobile. So on mobile, this might be a little bit big. So that's why we have our custom styles, but this would be good enough, and you could just take it from here. But we'll take it a step further. So if we go into our text component, we can define some default sizing styles to start off with. So we'll say const style map. This will be an object. And we can simply just define our styles by element type. So we can say H1 is going to have this set of classes here. Let me make that a string. Let me see if we have an H2 anywhere. Not on this page. Or this one. And you may have noticed too, I just caught this H1, this again kind of proves the utility of this. This H1 didn't have that text size style, so we may have already ended up with some inconsistent styles. Okay, so here's an H2. Looks like we don't have any styles applied to it, so we can just kind of make this up as we go. We can say H2. We'll say, how about text XL, and then at medium we can say 3XL. And you could kind of go on and on throughout or down the line there. So then what we could do is we can say const styles, and this can be a we can use a template literal here to inject our style map styles as well as any classes that are passed in on class name. So we'll have our predefined styles first. So we can say style map at element. And so what this will do is we're going to reference the style map object at whatever element is being passed in. So in our case here, in our index file, we're passing in the H1 element. So it's going to say, okay, style map H1, it's going to apply these styles. We should also make sure, because the default is P, we want to make sure that either we have a definition here, or we can say that we can actually let this. So we can say let styles, and then we can say if style map at element, then styles. So styles is undefined, and actually we can, I think we saw this in a previous video, it'll actually literally inject undefined, so we can just define this as an empty string. Then we can say styles, if it exists in the style map at element, so in our case, style map at H1, these styles will be applied, plus whatever our class name prop is, whatever string we pass in there. And now our class name can be, actually, let me back up a step. I'm realizing a mistake I made. So we have class name, we have styles as an empty string. This is only a pending class name if style map at element exists, but we always want to pass in the class name styles. So what we can do is we can say let styles equal class name. So our styles will take whatever string we pass in on class name. If there is no style map at element defined, then this gets skipped. If there is, in our case, we'll have style map at h1. It'll take that string here and then add on any other classes that we pass in through the class name prop. So now if we update this class name to be styles, all of those styles should be applied. So let's confirm that this is the case. We should see, because style map at h1 exists, this text style here, this class name, and then we should also see this margin bottom and this text center. So let's take a look and make sure that that happened. And you may have even seen the screen flash there. So we have our text size styles plus the margin bottom plus text center. So it applied all of those styles for us. And that's pretty much it. This one's a bit more quick. A couple of recommendations for kind of pushing this a little bit further, because I could certainly go through it, but it would be a lot of redundancy, is further define your style map. So, you know, H3 and maybe you have like, if you want to use this for like list items or like really any other element that you want to include for your text. You could continue defining that. And then in the rest of the project is finding any text elements that are rendered. So like label, you could use label and then create a like label classes. There's no more in this one. In our park, we've got the H2, we've got paragraph. So just going through and kind of making this your own and updating all of the styles, and then using that text component so that you've got that consistency throughout the application. And that's it. So we've got 3 common components in our components directory. There are a couple of other, common ideas like buttons, for example, is a big one. You can even start to make a little bit more kind of complex common components like forms and things like that. But this really helps with keeping things consistent, saves you the trouble of having to go when your application grows quite a bit and having to go through and track down styles, and just makes the application a bit more clean and polished. So I'll push this commit to the repo. It won't be finished, obviously. Like you can see this H1 still here, but if you want a good jumping off point, then this will be readily available for you. So thanks for following along, and until next time, have a good one.